I'm sorry, Miss Jackson. Ooh, I know it's for real. Never meant to make you cry. All right, chat. How we doing? Yeah, it's warming up again, isn't it? Oh dear. Mind you, tis but the summer. How we all doing? Who's here? We got Bianco. We got Scouty Cat. Hello. Uh, and Prickly Triangle. Oh, it might be a bit slower tonight. It was a bit of a late announcement. Continue keeping the high heat. Oh, as in we keep it and you don't have it down your way. Is it not hot in Greece right now? Hello, Jolly Han. Surely it's hot in Greece. I don't know. It was very bearable in the mountains. I was in the hills really, southern Bohemian hills this last weekend, and nighttime temperatures dropping to a crisp 13 degrees. That was pretty good. So we appreciate that, don't we? I'll turn that up a little bit. You're going to go watch the football. You're going to watch England versus Argentina. Well, I'm glad to hear it because I think I might be going to Greece next week, actually, is my plan. Yeah. Some 13 degrees, yeah. Mind you, it was still hot enough in the day, and I was outside, and I did get sunburn. So that's that. I don't know yet. I'm gonna do something I've never done before in my life, which is a last-minute package holiday. I know, kind of scary. But we were looking somewhere down near in south of Sparta, basically. Yeah. Hello, Draconi Manaveri. In a hot, sweaty pub. Yes. Oh, I will stay sunscreened. I'm not one. I'm not one for hanging out in the sun. I did manage to burn my neck over the weekend though, which was silly. Just the back of the neck and my top of my ears. Yeah, I don't really mind where it is. It is seaside though, and obviously there's plenty of history. So go out and find a bit of that as well. Be good. Other than that, just chill out and do not very much at all. That's my plan. And then next weekend, I'm going to be back in the field breaking down this hippie camp that I put up this last weekend. You wish to see the pigs that swim in the sea? I beg your pardon? That's no way to talk about tourists. Sounds like an ideal holiday. Yeah, exactly. Naf Pilo is nice, which is roughly in that area. Okay. I'll be sure to. I'm going to make a note of that. So we can look. We're literally doing last minute, and to see where it takes us. There we go. Passing the message on. Naf Plio. There's a Greek beach where the pigs swim, apparently. All right. Nice. Hey, Sunny Luminosaur. Hey, Alison. Sharing your British accent. You did your best. When? When was the British accent shared? This was missed. Not on my radar. Good evening, Summers. We'll wait a few more minutes, see if anyone else pops in, and then we will start our continue our Sherlock Holmes adventure, I should say. Good evening, Ziggy Wiggy. No one could understand you in the restaurant, so you sometimes had to use a British accent, and then they understood. That's hilarious. That is hilarious, Alison. I like that. Thank you, Jolly Han. Awesome. And welcome to the fold, Sunny Luminosol. Had to use his British accent for us. Well, I wonder if that's because the education system here orientates towards British accents, I guess. But I know plenty of Czechs who speak with an American accent, so that's quite interesting. A lot of American tourists come as well. Lord Swordplay, good evening. Mango, mango, mango. Hi, Barbarian. You say, okay, all right. I had to talk very British like this the whole time. Hello, dear. Would you like to have a little cup? I'd like to have a cup of tea, please. And can you send me some goulash? Risotto. 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 You're Scottish, Draconian. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's his name? The comedian from Glasgow. He does this bit about hating his English friends having to translate for him when he goes on holiday. And he does actually. He does an impeccable British, like English accent, but he refuses to. He's got a nice Glaswegian. So you're out on a Friday night when you know something's in the trouble. When someone screams across the road at you, "Hey, you!" International school, she learned to speak English with an American accent. Exactly. A lot of our T's is D's, and it confuses people. Risotto. Not Frankie Boyle. Not Frankie Boyle. What is his name? A little bit. Kevin Bridges. Yes, Kevin Bridges. Love Kevin Bridges. He's hilarious. Do you know, you're going on holiday down to Mallorca, right? And I'm in the pub and I'm trying to order myself a pint. I'll have a pint of lager, please. And the barman looks at me and goes, "Okay." And my mate says, "He'd like a pint of lager, please." Yeah, he's very funny, Kevin Bridges. Hello, Hangover. Hello, Bublina. Here they treat you in a really bad attempt at a British accent. Literally what happened to Alison and you. Yeah, there we go. A pint of Kutna Hona. Kutna Hona, beer. Sakambamba's biggest gaming. Hang on. Sakamba. Bamba is bit. That's Bambis. Oh, this is going to be summers all over again. Is gaming. Basp is gaming. Sakabamba's gaming. All right, never mind. You get this problem with a strong Yorkshire accent. Well, yeah, any regional accent, really, isn't it? Oh, look at that. Some internet love, bubbling out and hangover. Um, you can call me Jasper. Don't remember full names. Jasper. Oh, Jasper. Hang on, which Jasper? Not the Jasper I met yesterday, Jasper. Is that you? Sacabambis baspis is a lovely fish. Sacabambaspis. Sacabambaspis, Sacapapaspis, Sacapapambis, Sacapapambis, Sacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacapacap best fish. All right. Okay, Jasper. Got it. In March, Bo and I were in Studio 32 ordering drinks, and some drunk guy asked where he was from. So he said Edinburgh in his Scottish accent, and the dude was just like, "Oh yeah, you." And they just said, "I'm sorry." Samba babumpus. Samba bum 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 bumpus. You're giving me tongue twisters here this evening. Oh, okay, when you get it from the, yeah, when you get it from that, yes. All right, I keep cleaning these lenses, but they're not getting any better. Jasper is a fish. That's so cool. You have no fish fans. Amaze, amaze. Yeah, fish fans, dog fans, cat fans. What else? Llamas. I got alpacas and oh, hello, first time chat. Strider4343. Hello, hello. Bo has the cutest accent in the world. This is adorable. The fish, they're doing okay. horse fans. I'm not sure they like the heat much either, actually, because then the water temperature goes up. But then what can we do? Llama. Your accent makes me giggle. At least you don't think you're from Portland. Portland where? Portland, Oregon, or Portland somewhere else? You're all making me blush. Stop it now. Mark will hear about that. Fish want me, women fear me. Okay. Time to listen to Sean Bean on repeat. Here, you bastard. Come over here. I'll punch you if you say that to my sergeant again. You have everyone has an accent. We all have accents. Imogen, we all have accents. This idea that we don't have an accent. Oh, plink plink. Thank you, Boobler. Good afternoon, my lovelies. Hello, it's B. Alex Horn. Got the Sean Bean gravel this time. I told you, leave him alone. Oi, you, come over here. I told you. I'm just correcting my light situation here a little bit. Ranged. Better. Is the llama even alive? I know that was too close, wasn't it? Sorry, bubonic. Hello, Neola. Can't blame him. House to yourself? Nothing quite like it, is there? Almost fell into your mouth. Goals, indeed, is what Argentina probably will score against England this evening. What do we think? England in the World Cup final? Does anybody here care? Draconi probably doesn't. Poe's like, who cares? You hope not. Well, of course, because you're Welsh. You might give it all the Yorkshire vibes, but no American. What? No Argentina. It's going to be England and Spain. What final? Oh, Bublina. Love it. You haven't watched the World Cup since 2004. Okay. Because Haaland isn't. Yeah, well, should have done better. I don't care because American. It isn't even a real sport. Why are there so many Americans? Yeah, shut up. Honestly. Let people be. Isn't it? Let people be. All right, my pretties. Score 0-0. Come on. Has it started already? It's starting shortly, isn't it? That American accent made me uncomfortable. Which one? Let's play soccer in a microwave. Just giving that book a flex. So we are reading A Study in Scarlet. Let's see how far we get. Because it's a longer one. How many pages do we have left? Oof. Bloody hell, really is long. 86 and we're on 33. It's 53 pages, my darlings. It is reading time. You love a meet cute. What's a meet cute? I don't know what a meet cute is. That's all right. Don't worry, Bublina. Thank you, Alison. Appreciate that very much. When they meet and it's cute. Oh, they've met. But that's what happened last time. They've already got past their first case. Okay, I admit I have in the past reheated my tea. and coffee, and sometimes more than once, and there are reasons. Yeah, well, look, um, sometimes one gets distracted. What chili limio? Everyone knows no, you can't make the tea in the you can't make the tea in the microwave. You can reheat it. Um, over as man. Okay, a meet cute is the setup for. Okay, got it. It's starting it as a yes, exactly hangover. Uh, an ice cold cup of tea with milk. Because what is bubble tea apart from cold tea with bubbles in it? Why didn't I drink it while it was hot? Um, because I get distracted sometimes. You know, doing stuff around the house. Um, this is true. Overheating explosions are a thing. Um, no. Then you put ice in it to make it cold, right? Tea is sweetened and iced, or it's hot, dirty leaf juice. It is indeed Gale's size hole, and some of us like it that way. We like our hot, dirty leaf juice, milky leaf juice, warmed up in the microwave. And then you dunk a biscuit in it, and half the biscuit falls in, and you got half a biscuit in the bottom of the mug, and you drink it anyway. And then you get to that last bit, it's slightly gritty because it's a digestive, and some of those bits don't really dissolve. And you filter it through your teeth. That's how you drink tea. Milky leaf juice. Milky. All right. All right, Jolly Hand. Enjoy the football. Thank you for the pling plings. I just drink pure crude oil. Leaf juice and bean juice are both good. Now, to be honest, if my tea or coffee gets lukewarm or cold, I drink it like an adult I am and scold myself for leaving it to get like that. Okay, fair. Finally, a being of class. I'm sorry, I'm just thinking things now. Are we ready for Watson? Here we go. Chapter 4. What John Rance had to tell. It was 1 o'clock when we left number 3 Lauriston Gardens. Sherlock Holmes led me to the nearest telegraph office, whence he dispatched a long telegram. He then hailed a cab and ordered the driver to take us to the address given us by Lestrade. There's nothing like first-hand evidence, he remarked. As a matter of fact, my mind is entirely made up upon the case, but still we may as well learn all the fact there is to be learned. You amaze me, Holmes, said I. Surely you're not as sure as you pretend to be of all those particulars which you gave. Well, there's no room for a mistake, he answered. The very first thing which I observed on arriving there was that a cab had made 2 ruts with its wheels close to the curb. Now, up to last night, we've had no rain for a week, so that those wheels which left such a deep impression must have been there during the night. There were the marks of the horse's hoofs, too, the outline of one of which was far more clearly cut than that of the other 3, showing that there was a new shoe. Since the cab was there after the rain began, and was not there at any time during the morning, I have Gregson's word for that, it follows that it must have been there during the night, and therefore that it brought those 2 individuals to the house. Well, that seems simple enough, said I, but how about the other man's height? Why, the height of a man in 9 cases out of 10 can be told from the length of his stride. It is a simple calculation enough. There is no use of my boring you with figures. I had this fellow's stride both on the clay outside and on the dust within. Then I had a way of checking my calculation. When a man writes on a wall, his instinct leads him to write about the level of his own eyes. Now that writing was just over 6 feet from the ground. It was child's play. And his age? I asked. Well, if a man can stride 4.5 feet without the smallest effort, he can't be quite in the sere and yellow. That was the breadth of a puddle on the garden walks, which he had evidently walked across. Patent leather boots had gone round, and square toes had hopped over. There's no mystery about it at all. I'm simply applying to ordinary life a few of these precepts of observation and deduction which I advocated in that article. Is there anything else that puzzles you? The fingernails and the trichinopoly, I suggested. The writing on the wall was done with a man's forefinger dipped in blood. My glass allowed me to observe that the plaster was slightly scratched in doing it, which would not have been the case if the man's nail had been trimmed. I gathered up some scattered ash from the floor. It was dark in colour and flaky. Such an ash is only made by a trichinopoly. I've made a special study of cigar ashes. In fact, I've written a monograph upon the subject. I flatter myself that I can distinguish at a glance the ash of any known brand, either of cigar or of tobacco. It is just in such details that the skilled detective differs from the Gregson and Lestrade type. And the florid face? I asked. Oh, that was more of a daring shot, though I have no doubt that I was right. You must not ask me that at present state of the affair. I passed my hand over my brow. Well, my head is in a whirl, I remarked. The more one thinks of it, the more mysterious it grows. How came these two men, if there were two men, into an empty house? What has become of the cabman who drove them? How could one man compel another to take poison? Where did the blood come from? What was the object of the murderer, since robbery had no part in it? How came the woman's ring there? And above all, why should the second man write up the German word Rache before decamping? I confess that I cannot see any possible way of reconciling all these facts. My companion smiled approvingly. You sum up the difficulties of the situation succinctly and well, he said. There is much that is still obscure. I have quite made up my mind on the main facts. As to Paul Lestrade's discovery, it was simply a blind intended to put the police upon a wrong track by suggesting socialism and secret societies. It was not done by a German. The A, if you noticed, was printed somewhat after the German fashion. Now, a real German invariably prints in the Latin character, so that we may safely say that it was not written by one, but by a clumsy imitator who overdid his part. It was simply a ruse to divert inquiry into a wrong channel. I'm not going to tell you much more of the case, Doctor. You know, a conjurer gets no credit once he has explained his trick, and if I show you too much of my method of working, you will come to the conclusion that I am a very ordinary individual after all. Oh, I shall never do that. Bro, I answered. You've brought detection as near and exact science as it ever will be brought in this world. My companion flushed up with pleasure at my words and the earnest way in which I uttered them. I'd already observed that he was as sensitive to flattery on the score of his art as any girl could be of her beauty. I'll tell you one other thing, he said. Patent Leathers and Square Toes came in the same cab, and they walked down the pathway together as friendly as possible, arm in arm in all probability. When they got inside, they walked up and down the room, or rather, Patent Leathers stood still while Square Toes walked up and down. I could read all of that in the dust, and I could read that as he walked he grew more and more excited. That is shown by the increased length of his strides. He was talking all the while, and working himself up, no doubt, into a fury. Then the tragedy occurred. I've told you all I know now myself, for the rest is mere surmise and conjecture. We have a good working basis, however, on which to start. We must hurry up. I want to go to the Haller's concert to hear Norma Neruda this afternoon. Norma Neruda? It's a Czech name, Neruda. This conversation had occurred while our cab had been threading its way through a long succession of dingy streets and dreary byways. In the dingiest and dreariest of them, our driver suddenly came to a stand. That's Audley's Court in there, he said, pointing to a narrow slit in the line of dead-coloured brick. You'll find me here when you come back. Audley Court was not an attractive locality. The narrow passage led us into a quadrangle paved with flags and lined by sordid dwellings. We picked our way among groups of dirty children and through lines of discoloured linen until we came to number 46, the door of which was decorated with a small slip of brass on which the name Rance was engraved. On inquiry, we found that the constable was in bed, and we were shown into a little front parlour to await his coming. He appeared presently, looking a little irritable at being disturbed in his slumber. I made my report at the office, he said. Holmes took a half-sovereign from his pocket and played with it pensively. We thought that we should like to hear it all from your own lips, he said. I will be most happy to tell you anything I can, the constable answered with his eyes upon the little golden disc. Just let us hear it all in your own way as it occurred. Rance sat down on the horsehair sofa and knitted his brows as though determined not to omit anything in his narrative. Well, I'll tell it you from the beginning, he said. My time is from 10 to night. At 6 in the morning, and 11 there was a fight at the White Hart. But bar that, all was quiet enough on the beat. At 1 o'clock it began to rain, and I met Harry Murcher, whom was the Holland Grove beat, and we stood together at the corner of Henrietta Street talking. Presently, maybe about 2 or a little after, I thought I would take a look around and see that all was right down the Brixton Road. It was precious dirty and lonely. Not a soul did I meet all the way down, though a cab or two went past me. I was a strolling down, thinking between ourselves how uncommonly handy a four of gin hot would be, and then suddenly the glint of a light caught my eye on the window of that same house. Now I knew that them two houses in Lauriston Gardens was empty on account of him that owns them, who don't have the drain seed too. And the very last tenant what lived in them, one of them died of typhoid fever. I was knocked all in a heap, therefore, at seeing a light in the window, and I suspected that something was wrong. When I got to the door, you stopped and then walked to the garden gate, my companion interrupted. What did you do that for? Rance gave a violent jump and stared at Sherlock Holmes with the utmost amazement upon his features. Why, that's true, sir, he said. Though how you come to know it, heaven only knows. You see, when I got to the door, it was so still and so lonesome that I thought I'd be none the worse for someone with me. I ain't afeard of anything on this side of the grave, but I thought that maybe it was him that died of the typhoid inspecting the drains that killed him. The thought gave me a kind of turn, and I walked back to the gate to see if I could see Murcher's lantern, but there was no sign of him nor of anything else. There was no one on the street, not a living soul, sir, not so much as a dog. Then I pulled myself together, and I went back and pushed the door open. All was quiet inside, so I went into the room where the light was burning. There was a candle flickering on the mantelpiece, a red wax one, and by its light I saw. Yes, I know that all you saw. You walked around the room several times, and you knelt down by the body, and then you walked through and tried the kitchen door, and then John Rance sprang to his feet with a frightened face and suspicion in his eyes. Where was you hid to see all that? He cried. It seems to me that you knows a deal more than you should. Holmes laughed and threw his card across the table to the constable. Don't go arresting me for the murder, he said. I'm one of the hounds and not the wolf. Mr. Gregson or Mr. Lestrade will answer for that. Go on, though. What did you do next? Rance resumed his seat, without, however, losing his mystified expression. I went back to the gate and sounded my whistle. That brought Murcher and two more to the spot. Was the street empty then? Well, it was, as far as anybody that could be of any good goes. What do you mean? The constable's features broadened into a grin. I've seen many a drunk chap in my time, he said, but never anyone so crying drunk as that cove. He was at the gate when I came out, leaning up against the railings and singing at the pitch of his lungs about the Columbine's newfangled banner or some such. He couldn't stand far less help. What sort of a man was he? Asked Sherlock Holmes. John Rance appeared to be somewhat irritated at this digression. He was an uncommon drunkard sort of man, he said. He'd have found himself in the station if we hadn't been so took up. His face, his dress, didn't you notice them? Holmes broke in impatiently. I should think I did notice them, seeing as I had to prop him up, me and Murcher between us. He was a long chap with a red face, the lower part muffled round. That will do, cried Holmes. What became of him? We'd enough to do without looking after him, the policeman said in an aggrieved voice. I'll wager he found his way home all right. How was he dressed? A brown overcoat. Had he a whip in his hand? A whip? No. He must have left it behind, muttered my companion. You didn't happen to see or hear a cab after that? No. Well, there's half a sovereign for you, my companion said, standing up and taking his hat. I'm afraid, Rance, that you will never rise in the force. That head of yours should be for use as well as an ornament. You might have gained your sergeant's stripes last night. The man whom you held in your hands is the man who holds the clue of this mystery and whom we are seeking. There is no use of arguing about it now. I tell you that it is so. Come along, Doctor. We started off with the cab together, leaving our informant incredulous, but obviously uncomfortable. The blundering fool, Holmes said bitterly as we drove back to our lodgings. Just to think of his having such an incomparable bit of luck and not taking advantage of it. I'm rather in the dark still. It is true that the description of this man tallies with your idea of the second party in the mystery, but why should he come back to the house after leaving it? That is not the way of criminals. The ring, man, the ring. That was what he came back for. If we have no other way of catching him, we can always bait our line with the ring. I shall have him, Doctor. I'll lay you 2 to 1 that I have him. I must thank you for it all. I might have not have gone but for you, and so have missed the finest study I've ever come across. A study in scarlet, eh? Why shouldn't we use a little art jargon? There's the scarlet thread of murder running through the colourless skein of life, and our duty is to unravel it and isolate it and expose every inch of it. And now for lunch, and then for Norman Neruda. Her attack and her bowing are splendid. What's that little thing of Chopin she plays so magnificently? Leaning back in the cab, this amateur bloodhound carolled away like a lark while I meditated upon the many-sidedness of the human mind. Murder. Chapter 5. Our advertisement brings a visitor. Our morning's exertions had been too much for my weak health, and I was tired out in the afternoon. After Holmes's departure for the concert, I lay down upon the sofa and endeavoured to get a couple of hours' sleep. It was a useless attempt. My mind had been too much excited by all that had occurred, and the strangest fancies and surmises crowded into it. Every time that I closed my eyes, I saw before me the distorted baboon-like countenance of the murdered man. So sinister was the impression which that face had produced upon me that I found it difficult to feel anything but gratitude for him who had removed its owner from the world. If ever human features bespoke vice of the most malignant type, they were certainly those of Enoch J. Drebber of Cleveland. Still, I recognized that justice must be done, and that the depravity of the victim was no condonement in the eyes of the law. The more I thought of it, the more extraordinary did my companion's hypothesis that the man had been poisoned appear. I remember how he had sniffed his lips, and had no doubt that he had detected something which had given rise to the idea. Then again, if not poison, what had caused the man's death, since there was neither wound nor marks of strangulations? But on the other hand, whose blood was that which lay so thickly upon the floor? There were no signs of a struggle, nor had the victim any weapon with which he might have wounded an antagonist. As long as all these questions were unsolved, I felt that sleep would be no easy matter, either for Holmes or myself. His quiet, self-confident manner convinced me that he had already formed a theory which explained all the facts, though what it was I could not for an instant conjecture. He was very late in returning, so late that I knew that the concert could not have detained him the whole of the time. Dinner was on the table before he appeared. "It was magnificent," he said as he took his seat. "Do you remember what Darwin says about music? He claims that the power of producing and appreciating it existed among the human race long before the power of speech was arrived at. Perhaps that is why we are so subtly influenced by it. There are vague memories in our souls of those misty centuries when the world was in its childhood." "Well, that's rather a broad idea," I remarked. "Well, one's idea must be as broad as nature if they are to interpret nature," he answered. "What's the matter? You're not looking quite yourself. This Brixton Road affair has upset you." "Oh, to tell you the truth, it has," I said. "I ought to be more case-hardened after my Afghan experiences. I saw my own comrades hacked to pieces at Maiwand without losing my nerve. I can understand. There is a mystery about this which stimulates the imagination. Where there is no imagination, there is no horror. Have you seen the evening paper?" "No." "Well, it gives a fairly good account of the affair. It does not mention the fact that when the man was raised up, a woman's wedding ring fell upon the floor. It is just as well it does not." "Why?" "Look at this advertisement," he answered. "I had one sent to every paper this morning immediately after the affair." He threw the paper across to me, and I glanced at the place indicated. It was first announced in the Found column. "In Brixton Road this morning," it ran, "a plain gold wedding ring found in the roadway between the White Hart Tavern and Holland Grove. Apply Dr. Watson, 221B Baker Street, between 8 and 9 this evening." "Excuse me using your name," he said. "If I used my own, some of those dunderheads would recognize it and want to meddle in the affair." "Oh, that is all right," I answered. "But supposing anyone applies, I have no ring." "Oh, yes, we have," he said, handing me one. "This will do very well. It is almost a facsimile." "And who do you expect will answer this advertisement?" "Why, the man in the brown coat, our florid friend with the square toes. If he does not come himself, he will send an accomplice." "Would you not consider it as too dangerous?" "Not at all. In my view, if the case is correct, have every reason to believe that it is, this man would rather risk anything than lose the ring. According to my notion, he dropped it while stooping over Drebber's body and did not miss it at the time. After leaving the house, he discovered his loss and hurried back, but found the police already in possession, owing to his own folly in leaving the candle burning. He had to pretend to be drunk in order to allay the suspicions which might have been aroused by his appearance at the gate. Now put yourself in that man's place. On thinking the matter over, it must have occurred to him that it was possible that he had lost the ring in the road after leaving the house. What would he do then? He would eagerly look out for it in the evening papers in the hope of seeing it among the articles found. His eye, of course, would light upon this. He would be overjoyed. Why should he fear a trap? There could be no reason in the there would be no reason in his eyes why the finding of the ring would be connected with the murder. He will come. He will come. You shall see him within an hour. And then? I asked. Oh, you can leave me to deal with him then. Have you any arms? I have my old service revolver and a few cartridges. Well, you better clean it and load it. He will be a desperate man, and though I shall take him unawares, it is as well to be ready for anything. I went to my bedroom and followed his advice, and when I returned with the pistol, the table had been cleared, and Holmes was engaged in his favourite occupation of scraping upon his violin. The plot thickens, he said as I entered. I have just had an answer to my American telegram. My view of the case is the correct one. And that is? I asked eagerly. My fiddle would be the better for new strings, he remarked. Put your pistol in your pocket. When the fellow comes, speak to him in an ordinary way. Leave the rest to me. Don't frighten him by looking at him too hard. It is 8 o'clock now, I said, glancing at my watch. Yes, he will probably be here in a few minutes. Open the door slightly. That will do. Now put the key on the inside. Thank you. This is a queer old book I picked up at a stall yesterday. De Jure Intelligence, published in Latin at Liège in the Lowlands in 1642. Charles's head was still firm on his shoulders when this little brown-backed volume struck off. Who's the printer? Philippe de Croix, whoever he may have been. On the flyleaf, in very faded ink, is written Ex Libris Guillaume White. I wonder who William White was. Some pragmatical 17th century lawyer, I suppose. His writing has a legal twist about it. Ah, here comes our man, I think. As he spoke, there was a sharp ring at the bell. Sherlock Holmes rose softly and moved his chair in the direction of the door. We heard the servant pass along the hall and the sharp click of the latch as she opened it. Does Dr. Watson live here? Does Dr. Watson live here? Asked a clear but rather harsh voice. We could not hear the servant's reply, but the door closed and someone began to ascend the stairs. The footfall was uncertain and a shuffling one. A look of surprise passed over the face of my companion as he listened to it. He came slowly along the passage, and there was a feeble tap at the door. Come in, I cried. At my summons, instead of the man of violence whom we expected, a very old and wrinkled woman hobbled into the apartment. She appeared to be dazzled by the sudden blaze of light, and after dropping a curtsy, she stood blinking at us with her bleared eyes and fumbling in her pocket with nervous shaking fingers. I glanced at my companion, and his face had assumed such a disconsolate expression that it was all I could do to keep my countenance. The old crone drew out an evening paper and pointed out our advertisement. It's this as has brought to me, good gentleman, she said, dropping another curtsy. A gold wedding ring in the Brixton Road. It belongs to my girl Sally, as was married only this time 12-month, which her husband is steward aboard a Union ship. And what he'd say if he comes home and found her without a ring is more than I can think, he being short enough at the best of times, but more especially when he has the drink. If it please you, she went to the circus last night along with... Is that her ring? I asked. The Lord be thanked, cried the old woman. Sally will be a glad woman this night. That's the ring. And what may your address be? I inquired, taking up a pencil. 13 Duncan Street, Houndsditch, a weary away from here. The Brixton Road does not lie between any circus and Houndsditch, said Sherlock Holmes sharply. The old woman faced around and looked keenly at him with her little red-rimmed eyes. The gentleman asked me for my address, she said. Sally lives in lodgings at 3 Mayfield Place, Peckham. And your name is? My name is Sawyer. Hers is Dennis, which is Tom Dennis married her, And a smart, clean lad too, as long as he's at sea and no steward in the company more thought of. But when on shore, what with the women and what with his liquor shops. Here is your ring, Mrs. Sawyer, I interrupted in obedience to a sign from my companion. It clearly belongs to your daughter, and I'm glad to be able to restore it to the rightful owner. With many mumbled blessings and protestations of gratitude, the old crone packed it away in her pocket and shuffled down the stairs. Sherlock Holmes sprang to his feet that moment that she was gone and rushed into his room. He returned in a few seconds, enveloped in an ulster and a cravat. I'll follow her, he said hurriedly. She must be an accomplice and would lead me to him. Wait up for me. The hall door had hardly slammed behind our visitor before Holmes had descended the stair. Looking through the window, I could see her walking feebly along the other side, while her pursuer dogged her some little distance behind. Either his whole theory is incorrect, I thought to myself, or else he will be led now to the heart of the mystery. There was no need for him to ask me to wait up for him, for I felt that sleep was impossible until I heard the result of his adventure. It was close upon 9 when he set out. I had no idea how long he might be, but I sat stolidly puffing at my pipe and skipping over the pages of Henry Murger's Vie de Bohème. 10 o'clock passed, and I heard the footsteps of the maid as she pattered off to bed. 11, and the more stately tread of the landlady passed my door, bound for the same destination. It was close upon 12 before I heard the sharp sound of his latchkey. The instant he entered, I saw by his face that he had not been successful. Amusement and chagrin seemed to be struggling for the mastery until the former suddenly carried the day and he burst into a hearty laugh. I wouldn't have had the Scotland Yarders know it for the world, he cried, dropping into his chair. I've chafed them so much they would never have let me hear the end of it. I can afford to laugh because I know that I will be even with them in the long run. And what is it then? I asked. Oh, I don't mind telling a story against myself. That creature had gone a little way when she began to limp and show every sign of being footsore. Presently she came to a halt and hailed a four-wheeler which was passing. I managed to be close enough so as to hear the address, but I need not have been so anxious, for she sang it out loud enough to be heard at the other end of the street. Drive to 13 Duncan Street, Houndsditch, she cried. This begins to look genuine, I thought, and having seen her safely inside, I perched myself behind. That's an art which every detective should be an expert at. Well, away we rattled and never drew rein until we reached the street in question. I hopped off before we came to the door and strolled down the street in an easy, lounging way. I saw the cab pull up, the driver jump down, and I saw him open the door and stand expectantly. Nothing came out, though, and when I reached him, he was groping about frantically in the empty cab and giving vent to the finest assorted collection of oaths that ever listened to. There was no sign or trace of his passenger, and I fear it will be some time before he gets his fare. On inquiring at number 13, we found that the house belonged to a respectable paperhanger named Keswick, and that no one of the name of either Sawyer or Dennis had ever been heard of there. You don't mean to say, I cried in amazement, that that tottering feeble old woman was able to get out of the cab while it was in motion without either you or the driver seeing her? Old woman be damned, said Sherlock Holmes sharply. We were the old woman to be so taken in. It must have been a young man, and an active one too, besides being an incomparable actor. The get-up was inimitable. He saw that he was followed, no doubt, and used this means of giving me the slip. It shows that the man we are after is not as lonely as I imagined he was, but has friends who are ready to risk something for him. Now, Doctor, you are looking done up. Take my advice and turn in. I was certainly feeling very weary, so I obeyed his injunction. I left Holmes seated in front of the smouldering fire, and long into the watches of the night I heard the low, melancholy wailings of his violin, and knew that he was still pondering over the strange problem which he had set himself to unravel. Damn, indeed. Ah, yes, he does have a sense of humour, Sherlock Holmes, so good. All right, chap. We shall continue on page 41. Chapter 6. Tobias Gregson shows what he can do. The papers next day were full of the Brixton mystery, as they termed it. Each had a long account of the affair, and some had leaders upon it in addition. There was some information in them which was new to me. I still retain in my scrapbook numerous clippings and extracts bearing upon the case. Here is a condensation of a few of them. The Daily Telegraph remarked that in the history of crime there had seldom been a tragedy which presented stranger features. The German name of the victim, the absence of all other motive, the sinister inscription on the wall, all pointed to its perpetration by political refugees and revolutionists. The socialists had many branches in America, and the deceased had, no doubt, infringed their unwritten laws and been tracked down by them. After alluding airily to the Wärmegericht, Aqua Tofana, Carbonari, the Marchioness de Brinvilliers, the Darwinian theory, the principles of Malthus, and the Ratcliffe highway murders, the article concluded by admonishing the government and advocating a closer watch over foreigners in England. Sounds familiar? The Standard commented upon the fact that lawless outrages of the sort usually occurred under a liberal administration. They arose from the unsettling of the minds of the masses and the consequent weakening of all authority. Sounds familiar as well, doesn't it? The deceased was an American gentleman who had been residing for some weeks in the metropolis. He had stayed at the boarding house of Madame Charpentier in Torquay Terrace, Camberwell. He was accompanied in his travels by his private secretary, Mr. Joseph Stangerson. The two bade adieu to the landlady upon Tuesday, the 4th. Fourth what? INST? What's that an abbreviation for? Instantly, and departed to Euston Station with the avowed intention of catching the Liverpool Express. They were afterwards seen together upon the platform. Nothing more is known of them until Mr. Drebber's body was, as recorded, discovered in an empty house in the Brixton Road many miles from Euston. How he came there, how he met his fate, are questions which are still involved in mystery. Nothing is known of the whereabouts of Stangerson. We are glad to learn that Mr. Lestrade and Mr. Gregson of Scotland Yard are both engaged upon the case, and it is confidently anticipated that these well-known officers will speedily throw light upon the matter. The Daily News observed that there was no doubt as to the crime being a political one. The despotism and hatred of liberalism which animated the continental governments has had the effect of driving to our shores a number of men who might have made excellent citizens were they not soured by the recollection of all that they had undergone. Among these men there was a stringent code of honour, any infringement of which was punished by death. Every effort should be made to find the Secretary Stangerson and to ascertain some particulars of the habits of the deceased. A great step had been gained by the discovery of the address of the house at which he had boarded, a result which was entirely due to the acuteness and energy of Mr. Gregson of Scotland Yard. Thank you, Astara Hunt. Sherlock Holmes. Astronaut Anya. Hello. It is a raid. Thank you. Sherlock Holmes and I read these notices over together at breakfast, and they appeared to afford him considerable amusement. I told you that whatever happened, Lestrade and Gregson would be sure to score. Well, that depends on how it turns out. Oh, bless you, it doesn't matter in the least. If the man is caught, it will be on account of their exertions. If he escapes, it will be in spite of their exertions. It's heads I win and tails you lose. Whatever they do, they will have followers. Un sot trouve toujours un plus sot qui l'admire. I've got to put my glasses on. Hello, Kukuruza. Hello, hello. Yeah, this is also true. This is also true, the OG Hambo. Hello, OP99887. Cocaine was legal. Yeah, you could get some what do we call it? Some laudanum, couldn't you? You get all kinds of drugs from the doctor. Walk around with lead-weighted walking sticks and pistols. Oh, glorious times. Children drinking alcohol. The full name of the raidee is uh, Astronaut Anya. Everyone was had lead poisoning and was high on cocaine. That's it. Right, back to the book, my dears. Oh yes. Whatever they do, they will have followers. Où s'en trouve toujours un plus sot qui l'admirait. What on earth is this? I cried, for at this moment there came the pattering of many steps in the hall and on the stairs, accompanied by audible expressions of disgust upon the part of our landlady. It's the Baker Street division of the detective police force, said my companion gravely, and as he spoke there rushed into the room half a dozen of the dirtiest and most ragged street Arabs that ever I clapped my eyes on. "Attention!" cried Holmes in a sharp tone, and the 6 dirty little scoundrels stood in a line like so many disreputable statuettes. "In future you shall send up Wiggins alone to report, and the rest of you must wait in the street. Have you found it, Wiggins?" "No, sir, I ain't," said one of the youths. "I hardly expected you would. You must keep on until you do. Here are your wages." He handed each of them a shilling. "Now off you go, and come back with a better report next time." He waved his hand, and they scampered away downstairs like so many rats, and we heard their shrill voices next moment in the street. "There's more work to be got out of one of those little beggars than out of a dozen of the force," Holmes remarked. "The mere sight of an official-looking person seals men's lips. These youngsters, however, go everywhere and hear everything. They're as sharp as needles, too. All they want is organization." "Is it on this Brixton case that you are employing them?" I asked. "Why, yes. There's a point which I wish to ascertain. It is merely a matter of time. Hello? We're going to hear some news now with a vengeance. Here is Gregson coming down the road with the beatitude written upon every feature of his face. Bound for us, I know. Yes, he is stopping, and there he is." There was a violent peal at the bell, and in a few seconds the fair-haired detective came up the stairs 3 steps at a time and burst into our sitting room. "My dear fellow," he cried, wringing Holmes's unresponsive hand, "congratulate me. I've made the whole thing as clear as day." A shade of anxiety seemed to me to cross my companion's expressive face. "Do you mean that you are on the right track?" he asked. "The right track? Why, sir, we have the man under lock and key." "And his name is?" "Arthur Charpentier, sub-lieutenant in Her Majesty's Navy," cried Gregson, pompously rubbing his fat hands and inflating his chest. Sherlock Holmes gave a sigh of relief and relaxed into a smile. "Take a seat. Try one of these cigars," he said. "We are anxious to know how you managed it. Will you have some whiskey and water?" "I don't mind if I do," the detective answered. "The tremendous exertions which I've gone through during the last day or two have worn me out. Not so much bodily exertion, you understand, as a strain upon the mind. You will appreciate that, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, for we are both brain workers." "You do me too much of an honour," said Holmes gravely. "Let us hear how you arrived at this most gratifying result." The detective seated himself in the armchair and puffed complacently at his cigar, and then suddenly he slapped his thigh in a paroxysm of amusement. "Oh, the fun of it is," he cried, "that fool Lestrade, who thinks himself so smart, has gone off upon the wrong track altogether. He's after the Secretary Stangerson, who had no more to do with the crime than the babe unborn. I've no doubt that he's caught him by this time." The idea tickled Gregson so much that he laughed until he choked. "And how did you get your clue?" "Oh, well, I'll tell you all about it, of course, Dr. Watson. This is strictly between ourselves. The first difficulty which we had to contend with was the finding of this American's antecedents. Some people would have waited until their advertisements were answered, or until parties came forward and volunteered information. That is not Tobias Gregson's way of work. You remember the hat beside the dead man?" "Oh, yes," said Holmes. "By John Underwood and Sons, 129 Camberwell Road." Gregson looked quite crestfallen. "I had no idea that you noticed that," he said. "Have you been there?" "No." "Ha!" cried Gregson in a relieved voice. "You should never neglect a chance, however small it may seem." "To a great mind, nothing is little," remarked Holmes sententiously. Well, I went to Underwood and asked him if he had sold a hat in that size and description. He looked over his books and came on it at once. He had sent the hat to Mr. Drebber, residing at Charpentier's boarding establishment, Torquay Terrace. Thus, I got his address. Smart, very smart, murmured Sherlock Holmes. I next called upon Madame Charpentier, continued the detective. I found her pale and distressed. Her daughter was in the room too, an uncommonly fine girl she is too. She was looking red about the eyes, and her lips trembled as I spoke to her. That didn't escape my notice. I began to smell a rat. You know the feeling, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, when you come upon the right scent, a kind of thrill in your nerves. Have you heard of the mysterious death of your late boarder, Mr. Enoch J. Drebber of Cleveland? I asked. The mother nodded. She didn't seem to be able to get a word out. The daughter burst into tears. I felt more than ever that these people knew something of the matter. At what o'clock did Mr. Drebber leave your house for the train? I asked. At 8 o'clock, she said, gulping in her throat to keep down her agitation. His secretary, Mr. Stangerson, said there were two trains, one at 9:15 and one at 11. He was to catch the first. And what was that last which you saw of him? A terrible change came over the woman's face as I asked the question. Her features turned perfectly livid. It was some seconds before I could get out of the single word yes, and when it came, it was a husky, unnatural tone. There was silence for a moment, and then the daughter spoke in a calm, clear voice. No good can ever come from falsehood, mother, she said. Let us be frank with this gentleman. We did see Mr. Drebber again. God forgive you, cried Madame Charpentier, throwing up her hands and sinking back in her chair. You've murdered your brother. Arthur would rather that we spoke the truth, the girl answered firmly. You'd best tell me all about it now, I said. Half confidences are worse than none. Besides, you do not know how much we know of it. On your head be it, Alice, cried her mother, and then turning to me, I will tell you all, sir. Do not imagine that my agitation on behalf of my son arises from any fear lest he should have had a hand in this terrible affair. He is utterly innocent of it. My dread is, however, that in your eyes and the eyes of others he may appear to be compromised. That, however, is surely impossible. His high character, his profession, his antecedents would forbid all of it. Your best way is to make a clean breast of the facts, I answered. Depend upon it, if your son is innocent, you'll be none the worse. Perhaps, Alice, you'd better leave us together, she said, and her daughter withdrew. Now, sir, she continued, I have no intention of telling you all this, but since my poor daughter has disclosed it, I have no alternative. Having once decided to speak, I will tell you all without omitting any particular. It is your wisest course, said I. Mr. Drebber has been with us nearly 3 weeks. He and his secretary, Mr. Stangerson, have been travelling on the continent. I noticed a Copenhagen label upon each of their trunks, showing that they'd been their last stopping place. Stangerson was a quiet, reserved man, but his employer, I am sorry to say, was far otherwise. He was coarse in his habits and brutish in his ways. The very night of his arrival he became very much the worse for drink, and indeed after 12 o'clock in the day he could hardly ever be said to be sober. His manners towards the maidservants were disgustingly free and familiar. Worst of all, he speedily assumed the attitude towards my daughter Alice, and spoke to her more than once in a way which fortunately she is too innocent to understand. On one occasion he actually seized her in his arms and embraced her, an outrage which caused his own secretary to reproach him for his unmanly conduct. But why did you stand all this? I asked. I suppose that you can get rid of your boarders when you wish. Mrs. Charpentier blushed at my pertinent question. Would to God that I had given him notice on the very day that he came, she said, but it was a sore temptation. They were paying £1 a day each, £14 a week, and this is the slack season. I'm a widow, my boy in the Navy has cost me much. I grudged to lose the money, I act for the best. This last was too much, however, and I gave him notice to leave on account of it. That was the reason of his going. Well, my heart grew light when I saw them drive away. My son is on leave just now, but I did not tell him anything for all this, for his temper is violent, and he is passionately fond of his sister. When I closed the door behind them, a load seemed to be lifted from my mind. Alas, in less than an hour there was a ring at the bell, and I learned that Mr. Drebber had returned. He was much excited and evidently the worse for drink. He forced his way into the room where I was sitting with my daughter and made some incoherent remark about having missed his train. He then turned to Alice and before my very face proposed to her that she should fly with him. You're of age, he said, and there's no law to stop you. I've no money enough to spare, never mind the old girl here, but come along with me now straight away. You shall live like a princess." Poor Alice was so frightened that she shrunk away from him, but he caught her by the wrist and endeavoured to draw her towards the door. I screamed, and at that moment my son Arthur came into the room. What happened then I do not know. I heard oaths and the confused sounds of a scuffle. I was too terrified to raise my head, and when I did look up I saw Arthur standing in the doorway laughing with a stick in his hand. "I don't think that fine fellow would trouble us again," he said. "I will just go after him to see what he does with himself." And with those words he took his hat and started off down the street. The next morning we heard of Mr. Drebber's mysterious death. This statement came from Mrs. Charpentier's lips with many gasps and pauses. At times she spoke so low I could hardly catch the words. I made shorthand notes of all that she said, however, so that there should be no possibility of a mistake. "It's quite exciting," said Sherlock Holmes with a yawn. "What happened next?" When Mrs. Charpentier paused, the detective continued, I saw that the whole case hung upon this point. Fixing her with my eye in a way which always found effective with women, I asked her at what hour her son returned. "I do not know," she answered. "Not know?" "No. He has a latchkey and he let himself in." "After you went to bed?" "Yes." "When did you go to bed?" "About 11." "And your son was gone at least 2 hours?" "Yes." "Possibly 4 or 5?" "Yes." "What was he doing during that time?" "I do not know," she answered, turning white to her very lips. Of course, after that there was nothing more to be done. I found out where Lieutenant Charpentier was, took 2 officers with me, and arrested him. When I touched him on the shoulder and warned him to come quietly with us, he answered as bold as brass. "I suppose you're arresting me for being concerned in the death of that scoundrel Drebber," he said. We had said nothing to him about it, so that this his alluding to it would be a most suspicious aspect. "Very," said Holmes. "He still carried the heavy stick which the mother described him as having when he followed the Drebber. It was a stout oak cudgel." "What is your theory, then?" "Well, my theory is that he followed Drebber as far as Brixton Road. When there, a fresh altercation arose between them, in the course of which Drebber received a blow from the stick in the pit of the stomach, perhaps, which killed him without leaving any mark. The night was so wet that no one was about, so Charpentier dragged the bottom of his victim into the house. As to the candle and the blood and the writing on the wall, and the ring, they may all be so many tricks to throw the police off on the wrong scent." "Well done," said Holmes in an encouraging voice. "Really, Gregson, you are getting along. We shall make something of you yet." "I flatter myself that I managed it rather neatly," the detective answered proudly. The young man volunteered a statement in which he said that after following Drebber some time, the latter perceived him and took a cab in order to get away from him. On his way home, he met an old shipmate and took a long walk with him. On being asked where his old shipmate lived, he was unable to give any satisfactory reply. I think the whole case fits together uncommonly well. What amuses me is to think of Lestrade, who started off upon the wrong scent. I'm afraid he won't make much of it. Why, by the Jove, he's the very man himself." It was indeed Lestrade who ascended the stairs while we were talking and who now entered the room. The assurance and jauntiness which generally marked his demeanour and dress were, however, wanting. His face was disturbed and troubled, while his clothes were disarranged and untidy. He had evidently come with the intention of consulting with Sherlock Holmes, for on perceiving his colleague he appeared to be embarrassed and put out. He stood in the centre of the room, fumbling nervously with his hat and uncertain what to do. "Well, this is a most extraordinary case," he said at least, "a most incomprehensible affair." "Oh, you find it so, Mr. Lestrade," cried Gregson triumphantly. "I thought you would come to that conclusion. Have you managed to find the secretary, Mr. Joseph Stangerson?" "The secretary, Mr. Joseph Stangerson," said Lestrade gravely, "was murdered at Halliday's private hotel about 6 o'clock this morning." Always the Lestrade slander. All right. I believe this is the last chapter. What? Oh no, it keeps going. What? Well, I guess we're not going to finish this tonight. Goes to page 86. We do, however, have chapter 7, and then we start on part 2. So we're going to read chapter 7, and then we're going to call it a closed affair for tonight. I know. Time flies when you're having fun. Chapter 7. It's one of the long stories, yeah. Excuse me. Chapter 7. Light in the Darkness. The intelligence with which Lestrade greeted us was so momentous and so unexpected that we were all three fairly dumbfounded. Gregson sprang out of his chair and upset the remainder of his whisky and water. I stared in silence at Sherlock Holmes, whose lips were compressed and his brows drawn down over his eyes. "Stangerson too," he muttered. "The plot thickens." "It was quite thick enough before," grumbled Lestrade, taking a chair. "I seem to have dropped into a sort of council of war." Are you sure of this piece of intelligence?" stammered Gregson. "I've just come from his room," said Lestrade. "I was the first to discover what had occurred." "We've been hearing Gregson's view of the matter," Holmes observed. "Would you mind letting us know what you have seen and done?" "I've no objection," Lestrade answered, seating himself. "I freely confess that I was of the opinion that Stangerson was concerned with the death of Drebber. This fresh developments show me that I was completely mistaken. Full of the one idea, I set myself to find out what had become of the secretary. They'd been seen together at Euston Station about 8:30 in the evening of the 3rd, and 2 in the morning Mr. Drebber had been found in Brixton Road. The question which confronted me was how to find Stangerson had been employed between 8:30 and the time of the crime, and what had become of him afterwards. I telegraphed to Liverpool, giving us a description of the man and warning them to keep a watch upon the American boats. I then set to work calling upon all the hotels and lodging houses in the vicinity of Euston. You see, I argued that if Drebber and his companion had become separated, the natural course for the latter would be to put up somewhere in the vicinity for the night, and then to hang about the station again next morning. "They would likely to have agreed upon some meeting place beforehand," remarked Holmes. "And so it proved. I spent the whole of yesterday evening in making inquiries, entirely without avail. This morning I began very early, and at 8 o'clock I reached Halliday's private hotel in Little George Street. On my inquiry as to whether Mr. Stangerson was living there, they at once answered me in the affirmative. "No doubt you're the gentleman he was expecting," they said. "He's been waiting for a gentleman for 2 days." "Where is he now?" I asked. "He's upstairs in bed. He wished to be called at 9. "I will go up and see him at once," I said. It seemed to me that my sudden appearance might shake his nerves and lead him to say something unguarded. The Boots volunteered to show me the room. It was on the second floor, and there was a small corridor leading up to it. The Boots pointed out the door to me, and I was about to go downstairs again when I saw something that made me feel sickish in spite of my 20 years' experience. From under the door there curled a little red ribbon of blood, which had meandered across the passage and formed a little pool along the skirting up the other side. I gave a cry which brought the Boots back. He nearly fainted when he saw it. The door was locked on the inside, but we put our shoulders to it and knocked it in. The window of the room was open, and beside the window, all huddled up, lay the body of a man in his nightdress. He was quite dead, and had been for some time, for his limbs were rigid and cold. When we turned him over, the Boots recognised him at once as being the same gentleman who had engaged the room under the name of Joseph Stangerson. The cause of death was a deep stab in the left side, which must have penetrated the heart. And now comes the strangest part of the affair. What do you suppose was upon the murdered man?" I felt a creeping of the flesh and a presentiment of coming horror even before Sherlock Holmes answered. "The word Rache, written in letters of blood," he said. "That was it," said Lestrade in an awestruck voice, and we were all silent for a while. There was something so methodical and so incomprehensible about the deeds of this unknown assassin that imparted a fresh ghastliness to his crimes. My nerves, which were steady enough on the field of battle, tingled as I thought of it. "The man was seen," continued Lestrade, A milk boy was passing on his way to the dairy, happened to walk down a lane which leads up from the mews at the back of the hotel. He noticed that a ladder, which usually lay there, was raised against one of the windows of the second floor, which was wide open. After passing, he looked back and he saw a man descend the ladder. He came down so quietly and openly that the boy imagined him to be some carpenter or joiner at work in the hotel. He took no particular notice of him, beyond thinking in his own mind that it was early for him to be at work. He has an impression that the man was tall, had a reddish face, and was dressed in a long brownish coat. He must have been stayed in the room some little time after the murder, for we found blood-stained water in the basin where he had washed his hands, and marks on the sheets where he had deliberately wiped his knife. I glanced at Sherlock Holmes on hearing the description of the murderer, which tallied as so exactly with his own. There was, however, no trace of exultation or satisfaction upon his face. "Did you find nothing in the room which could furnish a clue to the murderer?" he asked. "Nothing. Stangerson had Drebber's purse in his pocket, but it seems that this was usual, as he did all the paying. There was 80-odd pounds in it, but nothing had been taken. Whatever the motives of this extraordinary crimes, robbery is certainly not one of them. There were no papers or memoranda in the murdered man's pocket except a single telegram dated from Cleveland about a month ago, and containing the words, 'J.H. is in Europe.' There was no name appended to this message." "And there was nothing else?" Holmes asked. "Nothing of any importance. The man's novel, which he had read himself to sleep, was lying upon the bed, and his pipe was on a chair beside him. There was a glass of water on the table, and on the window sill a small chip ointment box containing a couple of pills." Sherlock Holmes sprang from his chair with an exclamation of delight. "The last link!" he cried exultantly. "My case is complete." The two detectives stared at him in amazement. "I have now in my hands," my companion said confidently, "all the threads which had formed such a tangle. There are, of course, details to be filled in, but I am as certain of all the main facts from the time that Drebber parted from Stangerson at the station up to the discovery of the body of the latter as if I had seen them with my own eyes. I will give you proof of my knowledge. Could you lay your hand upon those pills?" "I have them," said Lestrade, producing a small white box. "I took them and the purse and the telegram, intending to put them in the place of safety at the police station. It was the merest chance my taking these pills, for I am bound to say that I do not attach any importance to them." "Give them here," said Holmes. "Now, doctor," turning to me, "are those ordinary pills?" They certainly were not. They were of a pearly grey colour, small, round, and almost transparent against the light. "From their lightness and transparency, I should imagine that they are soluble in water," I remarked. "Precisely so," answered Holmes. "Now, would you mind going down and fetching that poor little devil of a terrier which has been bad so long, and which the landlady wanted you to put out of its pain yesterday?" I went downstairs and carried the dog upstairs in my arms. Its laboured breathing and glazing eye showed that it was not far from the end. Indeed, its snow-white muzzle proclaimed that it had already exceeded the usual term of canine existence. I placed it upon a cushion on the rug. "I will now cut one of these pills in two," said Holmes, drawing his penknife, and he suited the action to the word. "One half we return into the box for future purposes. The other half I will place in this wine glass, in which is a teaspoonful of water. You perceive that our friend the doctor is right, and that it readily dissolves." "Well, this may be very interesting," said Lestrade, in the injured tone of one who suspects that he is being laughed at. "I cannot see, however, what it has to do with the death of Mr. Joseph Stangerson." "Patience, my friend, patience. You will find in time that it has everything to do with it. I shall now add a little milk to make the mixture palatable, and on presenting it to the dog we find that he laps it up readily enough." As he spoke, he turned the contents of the wineglass into a saucer and placed it in front of the terrier, who speedily licked it dry. Sherlock Holmes's earnest demeanour had so far convinced us that we all sat in silence, watching the animal intently and expecting some startling effect. None such appeared, however. The dog continued to lie stretched upon the cushion, breathing in a laboured way, but apparently neither the better nor the worse for its draught. Holmes had taken out his watch, and as minute followed minute without result, an expression of the utmost chagrin and disappointment appeared upon his features. He gnawed his lip, drummed his fingers upon the table, and showed every symptom of acute impatience. So great was his emotion that I felt sincerely sorry for him, while the two detectives smiled derisively, by no means displeased at this check which he had met. "It can't be a coincidence," he cried, at last springing from his chair and pacing wildly up and down the room. "It is impossible that it should be a mere coincidence. The very pills which I suspected in the case of Drebber are actually found after the death of Stangerson, and yet they are inert. What can it mean? Surely my whole chain of reasoning cannot have been false. It is impossible, and yet this wretched dog is none the worse. Ha ha ha! I have it! I have it!" And with a perfect shriek of delight, he rushed to the box, cut the other pill in two, dissolved it, added milk, and presented it to the terrier. The unfortunate creature's tongue seemed hardly to have been moistened it before it gave a convulsive shiver in every limb, and lay as rigid and as lifeless as if it had been struck by lightning. Sherlock Holmes drew a long breath and wiped the perspiration from his forehead. "I should have more faith," he said. "I ought to know by this time that when a fact appears to be opposed to a long train of deductions, it invariably proves to be capable of bearing some other interpretation. Of the two pills in that box, one was of the most deadly poison, and the other was entirely harmless. I ought to have known that before I even saw the box at all." This last statement appeared to me so startling that I could hardly believe that he was in his sober senses. There was the dead dog, however, to prove that his conjecture had been correct. It seemed to me that the mists in my own mind were gradually clearing away, and I began to have a dim, vague perception of the truth. "All this seems strange to you," continued Holmes, "because you failed at the beginning of the inquiry to grasp the importance of the single real clue which was presented to you. I had the good fortune to seize upon that, and everything which has occurred since then has been served to confirm my original supposition, and indeed was the logical sequence of it. Hence, things which have perplexed you and made the case more obscure have served to enlighten me and to strengthen my conclusion. It is a mistake to confound strangeness with mystery. The most commonplace crime is often the most mysterious because it presents no new or special features from which deductions may be drawn. This murder would have been infinitely more difficult to unravel had the body of the victim been simply found lying in the roadway without any of those outre and sensational accompaniments which rendered it remarkable. These strange details, far from making the case more difficult, have really had the effect of making it less so." Mr. Gregson, who had listened to this address with considerable impatience, could contain himself no longer. "Look here, Mr. Sherlock Holmes," he said, "we're all ready to acknowledge that you're a very smart man and that your own methods are working. We want something more than mere theory and preaching now, though. It is a case of taking the man. I've made my case out, and it seems I was wrong. Young Charpentier could not have been engaged in this second affair. Lestrade went after his man Stangerson, and it appears that he was wrong too. You've thrown out hints here and hints there, and it seems to know more than we do, but the time has come when we feel that we've the right to ask you straight out how much you know of this business. Can you name the man who did it?" I cannot help feeling that Gregson is right, sir," remarked Lestrade. "We've both tried and we've both failed. You've remarked more than once since I've been in the room that you had all the evidence which you require. Surely you would not withhold it any longer." "Any delay in arresting the assassin," I observed, "might give him time to perpetrate some fresh atrocity." Thus pressed by us all, Holmes showed signs of irresolution. He continued to walk up and down the room with his head sunk on his chest and his brows drawn down, as was his habit when lost in thought. "There will be no more murders," he said at last, stopping abruptly and facing us. "You can put that consideration out of the question. You've asked me if I know the name of the assassin. I do. The mere knowing of his name is a small thing, however, compared with the power of laying our hands upon him. This I expect very shortly to do. I have good hopes of managing it through my own arrangements, but it is a thing which needs delicate handling, for we have a very shrewd and desperate man to deal with, who is supported, as I have had occasion to prove, by another who is as clever as himself. As long as this man has no idea that anyone can have a clue, there is some chance of securing him, but if he had the slightest suspicion, he would change his name and vanish in an instant among the 4 million inhabitants of this great city. Without meaning to hurt either of your feelings, I am bound to say that I consider these men to be more than a match for the official force, and that is why I have not asked your assistance. If I fail, I shall of course incur all the blame due to the submission, but that I am prepared for. At present, I am ready to promise at the instant that I can communicate with you without endangering my own combinations, I shall do so. Gregson and Lestrade seemed to be far from satisfied by this assurance or by the depreciating allusion to the detective police. The former had flushed up to the roots of his flaxen hair, while the other's beady eyes glistened with curiosity and resentment. Neither of them had time to speak, however, before there was a tap on the door, and the spokesman of the street Arabs, young Wiggins, introduced a significant and unsavoury person. "Please, sir," he said, touching his forelock, "I've the cab downstairs." "Good boy," said Holmes blandly. "Why don't you introduce this pattern at Scotland Yard?" he continued, taking a pair of steel handcuffs from a drawer. "See how beautifully the spring works. They fasten in an instant." "The old pattern is good enough," remarked Lestrade, "if we can only find the man to put them on." "Very good, very good," said Holmes, smiling. "The cabman may as well help me with my boxes. Just ask him to step up, Wiggins." I was surprised to find my companion speaking as though he were about to set out on a journey, since he had not said anything to me about it. There was a small portmanteau in the room, and this he pulled out and began to strap. He was busily engaged at it when the cabman entered the room. "Just give me help with this buckle, cabman," he said, kneeling over his task and never turning his head. The fellow came forward with a somewhat sullen, defiant air and put down his hand to assist. At that instant there was a sharp click, the jangling of metal, and Sherlock Holmes sprang to his feet again. "Gentlemen," he cried with his flashing eyes, "let me introduce to you Mr. Jefferson Hope, the murderer of Enoch Drebber and of Joseph Stangerson." The whole thing occurred in a moment, so quickly I had no time to realize it. I have a vivid recollection of that instant, of Holmes' triumphant expression and the ring of his voice, of the cabman's dazed, savage face as he glared at the glittering handcuffs, which had appeared as if by magic upon his wrists. For a second or two he might have been a group of statues. Then, with an inarticulate roar of fury, the prisoner wrenched himself free from Holmes' grasp and hurled himself through the window. The woodwork and glass gave way before him, but before he was quite through, Gregson, Lestrade, and Holmes sprang upon him like so many staghounds. He was dragged back into the room, and then commenced a terrific conflict. So powerful and so fierce was he that the four of us were shaken off again and again. He appeared to have the convulsive strength of a man in an epileptic fit. His face and hands were terribly mangled by his passage through the glass, but loss of blood had no effect in diminishing his resistance. It was not until Lestrade succeeded in getting his hand inside his neckcloth and half strangling him that we had made him realize that his struggles were of no avail. And even then, we felt no security until we had pinioned his feet as well as his hands. That done, we rose to our feet breathless and panting. "We have his cab," said Sherlock Holmes. "It will serve to take him to Scotland Yard. And now, gentlemen," he continued with a pleasant smile, "we have reached the end of our little mystery. You are very welcome to put any questions that you like to me now. There is no danger that I will refuse to answer them." So, that, my dear friends, concludes our reading for the evening. It's quite a mystery. I can't remember how this one goes. I know. The cliffhanger indeed. Where are we to now? This is page 52, and next time we have, it's up to page 84, I believe. 86. So we have another 34 pages, and we've done 52 in the two sessions. We've got to do the two sessions on this. I know. 1.5 weeks to marinate in fear of missing out. Listen, it'll be Wednesdays, and we're going to continue. Sorry, mates, I can't come. I'm having to an 18. I'm sorry, but they're so long. What can I do? What can I do? Yeah, I'm working till the end of the week, and then at the weekend I should be off for a nice little holiday. What's the score of the footballs? Anybody keeping tabs on that? Stay fresh cheese bags. I like that. 0-0. Who's getting the better of it though? Is it going to go to penalties? Is that what's going to happen? That's what I hate about the Euros and the World Cup. and all that. Yeah, it's always 0-0, especially in these very important games because neither side want to lose. So they just kind of don't go to win. You know what I mean? It just doesn't make any sense. Don't get that in rugby. Don't get that in rugby. Thank you, nothing but lurking, Bublina, Alison, and Astronaut Anya for the raid. Jolly Han, and Finn's following. There we go. Alison and Jolly Han for all the subs and the bits and bobs. I think they should score a goal. That's my opinion. I agree. I have this idea actually. Rather than going to penalties, this is a much better idea for how to win. They used to have silver goal and golden goal. I don't know if anyone is old enough to remember that. They would basically play until one side scored a goal. I think they should just start removing players from the pitch. Right? So they play extra time, let's say 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and every 2 minutes they have to remove a player. Until after that 10 minutes, they remove 5 players, and then it's 6 aside. Right? And then for the second second bit of the extra time, they keep taking 2 players until they have 1 player each. And the last 2 players need to kiss and fondle in the center of the pitch. And then one of them gets the toss up of the ball. That's what she said. Yowie! Yeah, of course you would. Exactly. All right, chat. It always comes back to Yowie. Soccer Yowie, exactly. So, guys, thank you so much for coming and listening. This stuff will all be on VOD, of course. I'm going to make sure that that happens before the weekend, all the other ones. And I'll see you in a week and a half, I guess. Good to see if Mark's available and Sally, of course, but we'll probably do some Marketta and Michaela, and then back to the reading and more with Logan. And I want to start playing some kind of game. I tried getting hold of the computer man who's come back from his holiday, but whatever. Yeah. So in the meanwhile, thank you so much. You'll probably see me diving in and out of Instagram and X a little bit, but no streams for a while. Thank you so much. We will miss you too. I'll miss you too. But I am in sore need of just lying on a beach lounger doing all. All right. See you, chat. Oh, hang on. Wait. Sorry. Is there someone we can raid? Is there any raid? Is anybody raidable? So Danny, of course, Wednesday evenings. Let's do it. I think that should be right, isn't it? So Danny, or one word. The raid has been created, and we're going to be across in 8, 7, 6, 5, 4,